Welcome to the webinar on Toolkit for Requirements Elicitation. I am Suresh Tyagarajan, representing the Director of Fermata Consulting and a nomination committee member of Computer Society of India, Bangalore. In this session, we'll have a quick walkthrough of the issues that we face with requirements management. What are the types of requirements? What defects we generally come across in gathering requirements? Can we use a toolkit which has a patterns in it? And we'll also look at some case studies and the benefits derived out of requirements toolkit. Some of the statistics from CIO magazine says 71% of software projects fail because of poor requirements management. We also have statistics in 2003 which says that majority of requirements error contribute to 70 to 85% of rework in any software project. The slide that you are seeing by the side of it is an example of how a customer has given a requirement which is in his mind and how we design it, how we produce it, and what exactly is going back to the customer as a final product. You would have seen this slide many times, but the idea is that if you don't get things right at the first time, whatever amount of rework that you do, the customer will not be happy at all. If we have issues with requirements, let us start looking at different types of requirements. The first one is called as functional requirements. With these functional requirements, we are able to define the capability of the system or the product or the service, which means what the system should do, what the application should not do, or a combination of the services, what should be done, what should not be done. Let us take an example of the current session. For conducting this session, what are the functional requirements? Which means the requirements that should be there without which this session cannot be conducted. So we can start with the tutor, the author, that is myself. I should also have participants, that is you are. We should have a presentation material. We should have a network connectivity. We should have a software to run this meeting, and so on. Preferably, you might like to have a coffee or tea also. So these are the functional requirements for this session. Let us get on to the next type of requirement, non-functional requirement. It defines how well the functional requirement performs. We have defined a set of functional requirements, and each and every functional requirement has to be tested and prove that it is working well. This is indirectly saying that every functional requirement should have at least one test case, and this is what the non-functional requirement means. So let us take the example of our session. We have defined so many functional requirements. Let us try to get some non-functional requirements for some of the functional requirements. For example, the tutor, the author, that is me. How do we test my quality? Probably at the end of the session, you will be asked for a feedback. The feedback might have several ratings, and you may rate me in a scale of 1 to 5. How good was the internet connection? How good was the presentation in terms of clarity, legibility, usage of sketches, and so on? So, the non-functional requirement is about testing whether the functional requirement is working properly or not. So, these two functional and non-functional requirements are in our scope. There is nothing to be worried should I call it as a functional requirement or non-functional requirement. Tagging is not important, but getting the functional and non-functional defined in the requirements is very important. The third type of requirement is called constraint, that can include interfaces, the design limitations, and so on. For example, in this video conferencing, I still may not feel that it is a classroom session. So that is a constraint. But the interfaces required are the audio, the mic, the speakers. They are all not in my control, but I can have workaround to make them work properly. So the constraints are not in our control, they are out of scope, But when we are doing a product or service, we should make sure these constraints, the interfaces, the design limitations are provided with a workaround so that the system works fine, the application works fine, the service is very good. So these are the three types of requirements that we should keep in mind, and if you are able to provide these three requirements types, 50% of requirement gathering problems are solved. Let us understand some other defects in requirements gathering process. The first one that comes on the list is called implicit requirements, which means they are hidden or implied, they are abstract or one-line statements. Some may call implicit requirements as a type of requirement, but it is a defect in requirements gathering process. Let us understand what is a hidden requirement, implicit requirement, and how to resolve this problem. Let us take an example. I go to a restaurant, order for a cup of coffee. 3 words, cup of coffee. When I order for a cup of coffee, do I get only a cup and a coffee, or do I get something extra? Maybe you will start telling that you got a saucer, you got a tissue paper, you got sugar extra, you got a stirrer or a spoon extra, and some of you may be saying that you got a bill also, which is implied. I didn't ask for it. I asked for a cup of coffee. In some hotels, they may start with a glass of water. Depending upon where I am taking this coffee, the bearer's finger might be inside the cup or outside the cup. I didn't ask for it. I asked for a cup of coffee, but this implicit requirement has come along with it. Or if I go to a 5-star restaurant, probably the bearer will bring a cow in front of me, ask me to milk the cow. He'll also give decoction and ask me to prepare the coffee, and overall he will charge me a bill with a GST. I didn't ask for it. All these are all implicit requirements. How is this bearer able to give so many implicit requirements when I ask for just a cup of coffee? Is it because of his experience, his rapport with the customer, or some standard procedures that the restaurant is following? If you go to any part of the world, the MACD, the people are asking the same set of questions, and they have been trained to ask the same set of questions. So, who is in your project that can gather all these hidden requirements? Probably the project manager, the consultant, the business analyst, system analyst. Now the big question is, where are those requirements which have been implicitly collected by the people? Most of the times, they remain in their head. They are not documented anywhere. So when they leave the project, the implicit requirements also go along with them. When they leave the organization, the implicit requirements are lost once for all. So what should be done? We should document them as domain handbooks or checklists, and whatever form it can be reused. We call this as reusing the requirements. We also come across another type of defect in requirements gathering called unclear defects. They are ambiguous. It could be this way or that way. Let us take the same example of cup of coffee. When I ask for a cup of coffee, is the requirement clear? Most of you may say it's clear, but some feel it's not clear. And what is not clear? We are not clear whether I ask for a cup of coffee which is hot or cold, with sugar or without sugar, with milk or without milk, small cup, medium cup or large cup. The strength of the coffee is strong, medium or light. Especially in Bangalore, we have this requirement coming up in hotels. I need by 2 or 2 by 3. So when something is not clear, what should be done? We should ask questions to make it clear. And after it is clear, we should also document it like your implicit requirements. So the only way to avoid the defects related to clarity is to ask questions and document them. The last defect in the defect gathering process, in the requirements gathering process, is incomplete or missing requirements. They start with a simple table which was referred in a so and so page, but if I go to that page, the table is missing. In another page, a figure is asked for, but if I go to that page, the figure is not there. The another classic example of incomplete requirement is reference to standards. In every document, we will have references to standards, practices, procedures. But we don't use those standards, we don't buy those standards and look for requirements related to the project, use them in the project. Whenever the standard changes, then your requirement also changes. So the implicit requirements, unclear requirements, incomplete requirements are the defects in defect gathering process, and we have to resolve them by documenting the requirements after asking questions and also taking care of requirements coming from reference documents and standards. To help the project teams to collect requirements, we are providing a toolkit which has got requirements pattern with it, which are reusable requirements. You are seeing the index of the toolkit which has got the planning part, the elicitation part and the verification validation part. So under the elicitation techniques, you will come across different techniques to elicit requirements, and we have also provided the requirements pattern along with it as part of the toolkit. We will also get into the details of what a requirements pattern is, how does it look like, but if you are interested in getting this toolkit, you may attend either an online training program on requirements engineering or any workshop that we conduct on requirements engineering or business analysis, and this toolkit will be free for you. Let us look at one of the case studies of requirements pattern, the reusable requirements that we have built for one of the small companies where there were always freshers coming in every month and collecting requirements was a big challenge. If you look at the table that is given here, we have generated a requirements pattern for text. The text can be used either in an application or in a service industry for making a board or in an embedded system or in any type of project. We use letters on text, build up sentences and words. So if you look at closely the requirements related to text, we start with the consistency with existing text. Let us assume that you are rebuilding another application, so you need to maintain the same text consistency, or if you are using any embedded system or a board that is available, the consistency has to be maintained. Then there are requirements related to the size, the font family, letter spacing, the color, the style, whether it is bold or italic or underscore. Should we have a shadow? It should be capitalized or not? Multiple words, what should be the spacing? What should be the capitalizing for multispace? Should it be position left, right, center? So like this, if you look at the micro level requirements of a text, there are minimum 32 of them. For every project, for every activity, the developer or the designer need not collect requirements every time. So once I document this in detail, this becomes a pattern to be used in each and every activity, each and every project. In the same way, we have collected requirements pattern for a canvas, for an image, and 32 more elements like this. In the same way, for your project, for your organization, related to your project, you need to build this type of requirements pattern, and some of these patterns are common across projects, across the type of work. For example, the text and the image. These requirements never change from from project to project, industry to industry. The exhaustive list is same. You may pick and choose maybe 20 of them or 15 of them, but this list is to be repeated for every project. And it also becomes easy for the designer or the tester or the development team or the execution team to make a checklist of this and then check whether they have implemented each and every one of them which is applicable to the project. By this way, the testing effort on any of the implementation drastically comes down. The rework effort also comes down. So it's not only about requirements, even the execution, rework and the lead time to complete job, everything is completely brought under control. That is the whole benefit of this requirements pattern. The key benefits of requirements pattern: it cuts down the time to collect requirements drastically. And even for a newcomer, there is no chance of missing requirements. It's a good knowledge base for the new entrants. They are not really skeptical about, can I do this requirements gathering process properly or not? It also helps as a checklist for verifying the design, the implementation, the testing. The benefits are huge, and if you want to derive benefits out of this requirements pattern, and if you want a copy of this, do you want to reuse the requirements pattern? Reusing of reusable requirements? Please write to the author, and the email ID is given in the last slide. For any questions and queries, and also for a copy of requirements pattern, please write to suresh@fermata.co.in. Thank you for your attendance.